Welcome to Sullivan's Unheard Voices. I'm here at the Gilbert house with my new friend Meyer. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, this is going to be an awesome one. I can already just tell. How long have you been working at the Gilbert?
I will actually be celebrating my 1 year with the Gilbert House on the 27th.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's been an amazing experience. I grew up coming here a lot as a kid, and when I saw they were hiring, I jumped right on it. It was kind of like a match made in heaven. Everything just kind of fell into place where it needed to.
And so I've been in Salem now for about a year, and I started hearing about the Gilbert House as a place to go like about 6 months after I got here.
Okay.
And one of the things that I keep hearing, because I'm connected in the autism community, I'm with the Autism Society of Oregon, and one of the things that people always complain about is there's no places for kids to come and play.
Yeah.
And I keep saying, no, you need to check this place out because this place is amazing.
Oh, yeah. It's incredibly unique. I mean, where else can you go where you get to play in 3 Victorian mansions and just have a day of it and not be yelled at? But yeah, it's great. I mean, growing up and working here, I've seen that there's little to no effort that's really needed to make it accommodating for families with autism. It's actually one of the most popular places for families with autism to visit. So I'd love to hear that word is spreading and that you're kind of spreading that word for us.
Oh, it's awesome. One of the things that stands out too is when you come in this place, it's not just a playground.
Oh, no.
It's way more than that.
Oh, yeah. Everything is very intricately designed and thought about. Every exhibit that is featured in the museum, we spend months, if not years, putting together to make sure that, one, it's fun and engaging for children. Obviously, it's a children's museum, but also that there's some sort of an educational layer to that. So it's not just toys in a room. It's the exhibit we're in, Farm to Table. It's toys that teach you how to harvest crops, how to harvest eggs, how to check like chicken nests, milk a cow, pick fruit out of a tree, check the weather, things like that. We have ones that are all about you and like your anatomy, like bone structure, organs, babies. We have a submarine. We have a fort building one. We've got one that has an actual portion of a bus that was in use in Salem that was donated by the Chariot bus system. I know, it's super cool. So there's like the driver's seat, there's passenger seats, there's even like the toll collector thing next to the driver's seat. And what was really cool about that exhibit, when it was brought in, Chariots actually hooked a camera up to one of their buses and drove it around town. So that's on display in front of the driver's seat. So as you're there, you actually get to drive around Salem, and it's so much fun watching parents interact with their kids. They're like, oh, we're on Silverton. Oh, we're on Portland Road. Like, it's great because they're pointing out where they are, but it also helps kids realize like, oh, that's what this area looks like. So when they hear it, they're able to kind of pinpoint that direction as well. So it all blends in together, and it's just super cool.
And talk to me a little bit more about why interactive play is a way of actually increasing engagement with kids.
Of course. So what we have found is when children are given the opportunity to really get their hands on something, they want to learn a lot more. Like, I don't know about you, but when I was in grade school, if I was sitting and listening to something, I zoned out. I was out of there.
Every time.
Maladaptive daydreaming was my pastime. But when we were doing things where I got to be hands-on, where it was maybe a little messy, where I got to interact with like toys or plushies and interact with other kids and be a little bit more imaginative with things, I was more engaged. And those are the lessons that I remember the most. And really, our philosophy and our mission statement is encouraging learning through interactive play. And that goes all the way back to our namesake, Gilbert, named after A.C. Gilbert of the Erector Set and American Flyer fame. It was his philosophy, actually, to encourage that in children. So that's why he had the Erector sets and the chemistry sets and the infamous atomic energy set. Like, all of that had a purpose. It wasn't just because it was 100 years ago and they could get away with it. It was because he actually wanted to encourage children to learn about molecular science, about chemicals, about all of the different things that science has to offer, so that we would have a more scientifically focused world moving forward.
I appreciate that. And so if you're talking about AC as well, a lot
Mhm.
of people don't realize, well, a lot of people don't know, he's also an Olympic pole vaulter.
Yeah, he
Like,
set a record.
what?
And he's not just an Olympic pole vaulter, he's a
Oh,
gold
really?
medalist
Ah,
Olympic pole
yeah,
vaulter.
that's right.
So not only did he compete, he swept the floor with them. But he is actually a native Salemite. Like he's
Okay.
from Salem, Oregon. He was born and raised here for the first like decade or so. He
Uh-huh.
went to Forest Grove University. And his uncle's house is actually the main house in the museum. So that's the house that we're sitting in
Okay.
right now, is the Andrew T. Gilbert house. That was built in the 1880s as like this really opulent Victorian style mansion. It has also just had a very storied history with Salem, and it's kind of an icon of the town. So that's really why the Children's Museum was here. Everything just kind of lined up to make the most sense for it to be the Children's Museum. And I'm so happy that it is, because otherwise it probably would have either moved off location or just been torn down.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And that's one of the things that I love about this place the most, is not only is you have all of these interactive plays, but you also, as an adult,
Mm-hmm.
you can appreciate the architecture,
Right?
and the craftsmanship, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's like, yes, your kids are enjoying themselves and doing all this, but there's also stuff for parents to figure out and sort of pay attention to.
Oh, yeah. What I've noticed, like working here and walking around the houses while the exhibits are being used, is a lot of the times, like grandparents specifically will pay attention to their kids, but also pay a lot of attention to like just the finer details in the house, specifically in the A.T. Gilbert house. Like if you look up from where we are now, there's a lot of like rose themed molding around the top of the ceilings, and like these floral decals on the ceilings. A lot of the trim has these floral motifs on them too. And it's interesting because if you pay attention to it throughout the house, you can tell which areas were the main parts where the family lived and which areas the service staff lived and worked in, because the detail suddenly goes from like really cool and intricate to non-existent.
Interesting.
Yeah. And just the fact that we've been able to work with the city of Salem, who owns the houses, to help preserve some of the history. Like a lot of the wood fixtures, like the stairwells, railings, things like that, are original to when the house was built. And we've been able to maintain them, keep them like nice and shiny and pretty. And it just adds a unique charm that otherwise you wouldn't get in a children's museum.
Yeah. That's interesting. So this is like a partnership between Salem and AC Gilbert Foundation. Am I pronouncing it the right way? Probably not.
So the AC Gilbert Foundation, I believe, is a different organization from the Gilbert House. The Gilbert House Children's Museum is in itself its own organization, but we are partnered with the AC Gilbert Foundation. So there is a lot of love between the two of them, because we want to make sure that we are honoring and maintaining the memory of AC Gilbert.
Yes.
And this is a really big part to do it, because he spent a lot of years growing up here with his uncle. And the city of Salem actually owns the three main houses at the Gilbert House. They own the A.T. Gilbert House, the Rockenfield Bean House, which is where like our welcome desk and our gift shop are, and that Salem station. And they also own the Parish House, which is the big greenhouse right next to this one where our arts and crafts are. And those two houses, the Rockenfield House and the Parish House, were actually moved to this location. They were not originally here. As the downtown Salem area grew, and as like the government buildings needed to expand to accompany more people because it's the state capital, all of these houses that were built in the downtown Salem area needed to also be moved. And because of how in love the city was with these houses, they wouldn't let the city just tear them down. So, for example, the Parish House was actually moved 3 times since it was built, and it was purchased by the city of Salem in 1930. So it has been like Salem property for almost 100 years. And it was moved here in the early 90s. And so was the Rockenfield House. And those two were massive undertakings. That was like a really common thing back in the day, before like traffic lights and all that went up, because you could do it. And our founder actually rode in the houses as they were being moved with his kids. And when I heard about that, I was like, that's insane. I would be like throwing up, so anxious about it. But also, that's just such a cool thing to be able to claim.
Oh, I would have done the same thing. I would have been like, oh, yes, get me in that house. That would have been so awesome.
Talk about a thrill ride.
Yeah. So as people come in and they have the interactive play, what's a typical sort of day for a family to experience?
Yeah. So a lot of the times you'll start by coming into the Rock and Field house. It's where you check in, you get your wristbands, hand stamps, all that good stuff. And then from there, the most popular exhibit is our Main Street exhibit because it's right next to the welcome desk. And that one seems to be a huge hit all day. And then from there, families will spread off just based off what they're most interested in. They'll either go upstairs in Rock and Field, or they'll go outside to our Nature's Workshop area, play around with like the mud kitchen and the plants and all that. We also have a 20,000 square foot outdoor play area.
Nice.
So a lot of the time, especially during the summer, we just opened the brand new reimagining of it last summer. So this summer, we're anticipating everyone's going to come to make up for the lost time from last year. And they also will spread out into this house, into the Gilbert house, and interact with all the different exhibits here. There are more exhibits in this house than any of the other ones. And the most popular by far is going to be our creative space and our engineering studio in Parrish. Those ones are busy all day. Like people show up usually about 30 minutes after opening, but once they show up, people are there all day crafting. Honestly, I don't blame them. When I came here as a kid, those exhibits were not in that house. They move around a lot. And when I was little, it was actually in this house, in what is now our vet clinic.
Yeah.
Used to be the craft room, and it was all recycled materials. That was my favorite. I would spend hours in there, like crafting leprechaun traps or other things. Awesome. It was so much fun.
And then you say the number one attraction seems to be that first one that you come in. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that is?
So Main Street is kind of this exhibit where kiddos get to go in and they get to see a very simplified version of what day-to-day in like the city would look like. There's a post office section. There's a working ATM. There's like an Ace Hardware craft corner. There's a diner. There's a kitchenette. Like, they spend all day selling ice cream to the welcome desk and their parents, or they'll spend all day like putting letters all around, and they'll even deliver mail to the other houses too. So they're really on top of it. It just seems to be the most popular because it's right there at the beginning, but it's also a super engaging exhibit. So once they're there, they tend to want to stay there until they're like, oh yeah, that's right, there's more to this. Let's go have fun. Let's go to the vet clinic. Let's go to Fortopia. Let's go play outside.
And another thing that I always appreciate about the Gilbert is how much preparation and planning goes into turning new events and making sure that new places and things like that are always fresh. It's like every time you come down here, something's going to be different. Talk to a little bit about how much goes into that, because I don't think a lot of people understand.
Oh, there's a lot that goes into it. This last year, we've been doing a lot with the outside. So we had this big expansion and this big reimagining that happened there. There's still work that needed to be done. And I've actually been lucky enough to help manage those projects. So it took months and grants to get everything together. And in May, we actually had our picnic pavilion painted. So it's nice and fresh and crisp. We had new benches put in, so there's more seating outside. We had a section of our walkway remodeled from pavers into cement. So that way it's a lot more flat and level and more accessible. That was our big thing, is we noticed that it was a little tricky to navigate for visitors who are coming who may be wheelchair bound or otherwise mobility is a concern. So we have helped that by making it a lot more level, a lot easier to navigate, and you don't have to worry about any dips. And we spend months talking about it amongst ourselves. Like, it's not just me that's making all these decisions. I will come up with an idea, or someone will come up with an idea, and we'll bring it to the group, and we'll all kind of brainstorm together. So it's a collaborative process as well, which is amazing. And you don't really get to see that a lot with a lot of businesses like this, where everyone has a hand in it. Usually it's like one or two people are holding the reins, and everyone else is just along for the ride.
I really appreciate that, because I think it shows in the finished product. You know, like when everybody has ownership and everybody has sort of like a sense of belonging, things tend to be better in the end.
Yeah.
And along those same lines too, I want everybody to know that, the Gilbert is a safe space for everybody.
Yes.
And tell me a little bit more about that, because I think one of the things that I like this podcast to highlight is how the importance of acceptance and awareness and making sure that people have safe places to go regardless of who they are. And I know that you guys welcome everybody here. Tell me a little bit more about that.
So, as you probably noticed, when I'm referring to people who come to the Gilbert House, I refer to them as visitors.
Yes.
And that is just that. They're visiting us. So we're wanting to be as hospitable as possible. We're not wanting to make them feel uncomfortable. We're wanting to help. Like if they have questions or if they have concerns, we are addressing those questions and concerns. So a lot of the times when parents come specifically with like autistic children or neurodivergent children who maybe get a little overwhelmed, maybe transitioning is a little harder. We had a kiddo that came and he was having so much fun outside that when the museum closed, he just didn't want to leave. And that transition was a little hard for him. But we were there and we were reassuring the parents that we're not mad at you. We understand what's going on. If you need our help in any way, just let us know what we can do to help. And all of our staff, we have a lot of like teachers, we have a lot of people who are experienced with all different kinds of people who kind of bring that expertise in and can help accommodate better. And when we make plans for like reimagining those spaces, like our outdoor area, we approach it with the mindset of how can this be accessible to the most people possible. The biggest hurdle to that is mobility with the Victorian houses. Unfortunately, it's not easy for us to put in accessibility to get everyone up to the second floor of the houses. And that is just an unfortunate side effect of being in historic buildings that
100%.
We can't make really big structural changes. But we try to make everything that is on ground level as engaging as possible. There's no like real difference between the exhibits that are upstairs and the exhibits that are downstairs as far as like theming, engagement, interactivity, all of that. And we even have exhibits that cater more towards people who might be sensitive to sound or sensitive to light. We have a sensory portal exhibit that is darker. It has some like interactive toys that are a little bit more calming and can really help you focus on just that and not necessarily everything else that's going around. And we also, during our operating hours, don't blast music through the museum. So there's one or two exhibits that'll have like a musical element to them, like our lights, camera, action exhibit where you're in a movie. But other than that, it's pretty quiet. And the noise level is just based off of everyone else around you. So we also don't want to add to that stress as well.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I also appreciate all of like the cool events that you all have going on. Like you have something coming tomorrow.
Yes, our summer block party. So that's like our annual.
This is going to air tomorrow. So this is actually going to be tonight. So.
So our summer block party is our annual like kickoff to summer event. Traditionally, it's been held like out in front of the museum in those parking spaces where you kind of got to go around from booth to booth. And this year's a little different. Our promotions coordinator, Natalie, put in so much work to make sure that this year was exceptional. So instead of having everything out front, it's now all inside the museum.
That's awesome.
Right?
That's awesome.
And during this event as well, a huge part of the legacy of the Gilbert House Children's Museum has been children being able to leave their mark on the museum.
Yeah.
We've had like painted wood tiles that were on display outside. We've had painted ceramic tiles that are still on display outside. There's handprints on the sides of one of the houses that have like all these different people's names. And there's so many ways that people have left their mark on the museum. And during this event, people are going to have another opportunity to.
Tell me more.
So the wood tiles that I mentioned that were hand painted by children, those were put up in the 90s. So like in 1998, when that outdoor area first opened, that's when those were put up. And obviously those kids have grown up and they're now my age and they have kids of their own. And it's super cool. They get to come back and kind of point it out. But we're also making way with this new event of allowing their children to leave their marks. So during this event, they'll be able to buy those tiles, paint them, and then we'll have them put up outside so they can come for the next few years and be like, oh my gosh, I got to put that up at the Gilbert House. Do you have something at the Gilbert House?
Awesome.
No, I do. I have something at the Gilbert House. So I'm really looking forward to that. That seems to be the highlight. And when we announced that, that seems to be like the big draw for this event. Everyone's wanting to do it. So I'm really excited to see everyone's artwork, the different designs that the kids can come up with, and just how it all comes together outside.
I can't wait to see the finished product.
Oh, I can't either. It's going to bring so much color and life to the outside area. Not that it doesn't have that already, but just always adding.
Yeah.
I love to always add more color when I can.
And it's refreshing,
yes.
And then the sense of community there too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And along those lines as well. So like, I know if people like have an interest in learning more about the Gilbert House.
Yeah. We have a lot of resources. So we have all of our staff members are pretty well rehearsed in like the history of the houses, everything that we have. We have a very well laid out website that will list out like everything about the museum, from policies to frequently asked questions to upcoming events. We also have volunteers from the area that come all the time, and they do things from landscaping to painting to helping with the events to helping with our summer camp and our homeschooling programs. So there's a lot of opportunity for the community to not only learn about the Gilbert House, but to also help in supporting the Gilbert House by either offering their time. A lot of the times people will donate like their old Erector sets or American Flyer sets as well. So they get to kind of add to the collective nostalgia and the collective like energy of the museum.
And I'm glad you said that, because that's a piece of the Gilbert that a lot of people don't know is about the community involvement. Like, you guys go out in the community and help too. It's not just that you have this place here, but you also are heavily involved in the community as well.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a couple of programs.
Yes. So we have our Homeschool Adventures program that happens during the school year. Our education coordinator, Julia, is the one that heads that up, and she's amazing. She spends so much time making sure that the programming is good. She makes sure that it's engaging.
Yeah.
She makes sure that, like, okay, the kids are going to want to do this, but also it's going to be super educational and they're going to learn so much from it. And then she takes all that energy and also applies it to the summer camp program. And that one is also super cool, because not only do they get to do these different like weekly activities, it's the whole week is that activity.
Oh, fascinating.
So for instance, one of the weeks is detective.
Oh, that's
and what they get to do is they get to learn about forensic science. They get to solve a crime. And then usually like every week they'll have like some sort of an excursion. I know in the past they've had excursions to create a memory. They've had excursions to the splash pad at the riverfront. There's just so much in downtown Salem that is open and available for families, and really just loves to work with the Gilbert House. So it's easy to set those up. So it makes it like this memorable experience of, what did you do over the summer? Oh, I hung out at the Gilbert House and I painted a pot and I got to solve a crime. What about you?
Where was this when I was a kid?
Right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That would have been so awesome.
I just went to regular summer camp, so I got to sleep in a cabin and get eaten alive by mosquitoes.
You and me both. Actually, it's very similar to my experience there. And so like so what are some of the other events that are coming up this summer?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned before, there is this longstanding legacy of people like having left their mark with the Gilbert House, and now they're adults. Well, a lot of the times those adults are still children at heart. They don't just leave Gilbert House behind. Like they might when they're a teenager. They have bigger, better things on their mind, like acne. But when they're older and they have kids of their own, their interest suddenly comes back. And we actually have an event coming up in July called Gilbert House for Grownups, which is just a 21 and over event. You get to come and you get to hang out. You get to have a drink or two, kind of like go through the houses, reminisce about your childhood, and like, wow, I remember when this was like all about me. And you got to climb inside of someone's immune system. That was an actual exhibit we had when I was a kid. It was super cool.
That's awesome.
And the energy that's brought to that event is just amazing, because you think, oh, they're adults and they've got like a drink or two in them. They're going to be rowdy. It's going to be hectic. It's going to be inappropriate. No, that tends to be one of our better behaved events. They're acting like in line because they know that there's consequences if they don't. But like, the sense is that this is almost like hallowed ground to them. This is a part of their childhood, and they don't want to tarnish that memory by acting crazy when they're an adult. And they come in and there's so much respect. And from that, like, I've actually had a couple volunteers that came to that event, and then they wanted to volunteer at the museum afterwards because they went to that event. They're like, oh, I really like it here. I want to support the museum a little bit more. How can I be involved in the museum. And we also have like a Halloween event. We have New Year's Eve where we do a big balloon drop. And last year, we actually were featured in the Christmas parade in downtown Salem.
Awesome.
Yeah, we handed out a bunch of these like different craft activities instead of candy. It was really cool. Everyone was super excited about it. It was raining a little bit, but hey, it's Oregon in the wintertime. What are you going to get?
Every time.
Exactly.
Right? Well, I appreciate the time we spent together today.
This has been great.
Yeah. So I'm on the board of the Autism Society of Oregon.
Nice.
And Toby doesn't know I'm doing this. I wanted to give you a kindness coin.
Oh, thank you.
Because you all every year give us passes to the Gilbert House for our autism walk in Salem. And it's one of the most requested things as people come through.
Really?
Right. Yes.
Oh my goodness.
So if they don't have that little card that says you can come to the Gilbert House, they come back and they're like, we want, or can I get a couple more?
Can I?
Yep. And so it means so much to me to see that presence there and have that sort of partnership. And I just wanted to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. As a board member and as somebody who's autistic, it just means a lot to have a company like this actually be a part of our community.
Thank you. From the bottom of all of our hearts, thank you as well. We love supporting our local organizations and specifically like the Autism Society. You guys do such great work. We don't mind helping you out every year.
Right.
And it warms my heart that families are requesting like more BOGO passes for that. They're requesting like, hey, do you still have this? Like, can we go? Because that just means that like we're doing our job right. Everything that we're doing, we're aces on it. And that just means so much to me because we put in so much work and it's great to hear that it all pays off. And as someone who has also been diagnosed with autism, it's great that organizations like yours are out there. And I love being able to work somewhere where I can help like encourage kiddos who also may have the same diagnosis to go out and socialize and find things that they really love. Because like growing up as a little autistic child, like coming here was one of the times where I got to interact with people who weren't my cousin and who I didn't go to school with. And I got to learn about like all different cultures. I got to learn about people who have like maybe different accessibility requirements. And it opened up my eyes a little bit more than it otherwise would have. So I love being able to support the museum. And I love that organizations like the Autism Society of Oregon also appreciate that support and in kind offer their support as well.
Yeah. And you heard it from me, y'all. You got to get here with your kids and check this place out. You will not be disappointed. Meyer, thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you.
It was a pleasure.